Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. What an amazing presence. As someone described this morning, innovation, disruption, and entrepreneurship doesn't exist in the cloud. It doesn't exist on laptops. It exists in people that actually want to make a difference. And the fact that you're here today actually is a demonstration of a desire to move forward and to make a difference to this community. So this is where the famous clicker doesn't fit. So who am I? My day job, I'm a VC, but historically I've invested a lot in very early stage businesses. I have over 100 investments personally. And I can assure you of the 100, probably most of them are failures, and a few of them are successes. But fortunately, the successes outweigh the failures in terms of total amount that I make. Previously, I used to work for Techstars. Until 2 years ago, I helped their very first international office in London. When I joined, there was 6 programs in the US and London. When I left, there was 18, and today there are 28. And I think that represents a symptom of how the world is exploding and how entrepreneurship is making a difference, not just in the US, but everywhere around the world. And then I'm blind. This is going to be fun. Right. Somebody needs to buy you a clicker. This is me on a Monday. I have 5 basic criteria that I invest in. And it is what it says. I invest in team, opportunity, and team. But one of the biggest distractions as an investor is team only represents a small number of the overall things that you can assess. But what you should look at is everything else and what it actually means to the team, and I'll explain that further. Somebody else going to press up. So let's describe the reasons why startups don't work, because that's actually is easier to explain when it doesn't work than when it does. And the single largest reason why startups don't work is when the founders fall out with each other. And this happens about 50% of the time. I think there's a simple statistic, which is that in the first 2 years of any startup, you will lose between 1/3 and 1/2 of your founders. That's assuming that they leave nicely. On most occasions, what ends up happening is the teams break up and the company falls apart. So when you start a startup, one has to be really careful about who you're setting it up with. But as an investor, one of the big things I've found is unless a company has been around for at least 6 months, I won't invest in the team because they have to build a rapport and understand each other. The second one. Bad hires. What do I mean? If you work in a large corporate, your instinct is never hire somebody smarter than you, because they might have your job. When you're in a startup, what you have to do is learn to hire people smarter than you. I describe it, imagine being lazy. The key to being a successful entrepreneur is being lazy. It's actually finding people smarter than you to give work to so that you can do something else. The problem is most people don't, and it takes someone with real commitment and someone who's very trusting to hire somebody smarter. Because if you hire somebody smarter and then you teach them to hire someone smarter again, the average IQ in your company increases. And you want to find founders and entrepreneurs who actually have a willingness to hire smarter people. If you hire less smart people, and they hire less smart people, and on, what ends up happening is the average IQ of the company falls, doesn't increase. Sometimes people aren't bold enough, and one of the biggest reasons why, it's easy to say, one of the reasons why investors don't invest is because they're not ambitious enough. You almost want someone to be so ambitious that you almost don't believe it's possible. It's a really tricky balance. Trying to find people who are never satisfied, and they want to address really big, incredibly smart problems that other people would say are really almost impossible to do. Because at that point, you're trying to shoot for the stars. And even if you just hit the moon, you're doing okay. In the same light, one of the biggest problems you have, if you're investing in companies which are going after a niche and the niche is too small, people really struggle. Because imagine the fact that the chances of you actually building a successful startup and actually doing everything, and then it being a really small market, it's just not worth the effort. You're going to be challenging yourself. You're going to be pushing the limits of your capability. And then you kind of go, but it's only a really small market. Be ambitious, be bold. And then finally, the obvious one. Build for a customer. Don't build for what's in your head. The key to finding a good investment is finding someone who is completely fixated by customers. Not talking about getting them, but actually going and finding real customers. You can't delegate that to someone. You can't say, oh, and then we'll hire someone to go and get us customers. It shows a real dedication that if you can get a really smart, technical entrepreneur who stares at his feet all day, and he actually starts looking at people, and he actually starts selling, it's a really compelling proposition. And it's such a bold step, but it's one of the most crucial steps, being completely fixated by your customer and satisfying their need. So what's the opposite of all of this? When do I see people winning? When you have an amazing team. When you have a team of people who get up in the morning and they all want to win. It's not a person, it's about all of the individuals together. When you talk to not just the entrepreneur, you talk to everyone else in the team, and they're really dedicated to running up hills, running through walls, making a difference. That makes such a profound difference. Do we know what these are? Cockroaches. Do you know what's really special about a cockroach? In the middle of a nuclear war, these are the only things that will survive. This is what an entrepreneur should do. No matter what happens, you survive. You survive until you build a big company. There's no such thing as a quick win. All the really successful businesses have gone through tenacity and resilience. And you have to behave like a cockroach You must survive. And you have to be flexible. What you think on day zero when you build a business, on the product that you think, the reality is you're going to have to change. You're going to have to be flexible enough to recognize that the thing that you thought was the problem and the solution may be different. So you need to be resilient, but you also need to be thoughtful and listen to other people and be willing to change to satisfy and to meet customer demand. Cadence. You need to get up. So this is really important to me. This shows to me the real difference between an average team and a rock star team. A team which, when you talk to on a weekly basis, they can come back and tell you exactly what they've done and what a difference they've made. It's such an important trait. Like every week you have to build and you have to be better than you were a week earlier. Not a month, a week. Every week you do something. Every week you make a difference. Every week you learn something about the customers. The more you can build a cadence, the more you can build a repetition week to week of making a difference and making an improvement, makes such a difference. If you're only changing every month, you change 12 times. If you change on a weekly basis, that's 52 times in a year. A 1% change every week makes you double the size of the business that you were for. The customers, the obvious one. When you can see an entrepreneurial team who gets out and starts winning customers, then you really make a difference. And it's because you suddenly realize you have a full team that actually has thought through the whole problem. They built a team, they built a product, they have customers, people are giving them money. That's an amazing life cycle. And for those out there who actually want to make a difference, when you get to a customer and they give you money, it's the biggest kick you will ever have. It makes a difference. It shows someone cares as much about your product as you do. So let me describe, from an investment perspective, how you think about these things. Oh, all right. So this is what it's like to be an investor, and this is what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Investors invest in a portfolio. You can't call yourself an angel investor unless you haven't done at least 10 investments. And it's an important number. So typically, what happens is half of the companies will go bust. And only 1 out of 10 will make more money to pay for everything. That means my job's easier than your job. Because I get to pick 10 teams and 10 businesses. Entrepreneurs get to pick 1. So you must make it count. You need to be this one. But investors invest because it's high risk in a portfolio. And you have to recognize that sometimes an investor is not the right person for your business. Because they want you to push harder. They want you to be the 30x. And they actually don't care whether you can go to 0. Because he knows that half of his portfolio will be 0. He wants to have disproportionately large outcomes to pay for all his investments. Here's also something to think about. Is for an entrepreneur, doing a business is hard. And it's also different. For first-timers, you'll find that about 20% chance that you'll turn a success. Even for someone who's done it multiple times, it's only about 50% more. But as an investor, you're more likely to invest here and here and here. So to get investment as a first-time entrepreneur, you have to be really special. You have to shine. You have to think about the people around you. You have to think about having customers. You have to think about repeated cadence. But here's something as well. For old folks like me in the room, actually, the real people who make real money are those which are slightly older, because they've been out in the real world and they've seen big problems. So I describe 20-somethings and start 3 types of businesses. One, they fix problems that they see. So what does a 20-something-year-old start as a startup? A dating app. Why do you think 20-something invents a dating app? Yeah? Second one is they invent things like delivery, which is I can't get out of bed in the morning or in the evening, somebody just needs to send me food. Yeah? They fix the problems which are in front of them. And they fix bar queuing apps. I can't get to the bar fast enough. Give me an app. Yeah? So what you tend to find is in their late 30s, after they've been in another job and they've seen problems, that's when they see opportunity. They've seen the problem, they want to fix it. And so why would anybody invest after all that? Probably the worst reason is to make money. Because the chances of you ever making money as an investor, particularly if you invest only a small number of checks, it's very hard. Most investors do it because they're really interested. They really find it interesting. And that's the key as an entrepreneur. If you're trying to get someone to invest in you, they have to find it really interesting. It has to be intellectual curiosity. The last bit is fun. Most angel investors are people who built, sold businesses, made money. They know what it's like to go on that journey. And one of the biggest reasons why an angel will invest is because they want to support someone else to go on that journey. But you have to shine like a star. You have to be the person that they go, I can't help but this guy's amazing. Or this gal's amazing. I want to make them successful. I can see the opportunity. Angel investors don't invest for rational reasons. They invest because they genuinely believe that you're going to go on a journey like they went on a journey. They see something like themselves in you. And that's what it is that they want to be part of. They want to get that kick. They want to go on that journey again. And it's fun. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
No, stay on stage. I think we have a couple of questions for you. Итак, у кого будут вопросы к Джону? Либо этот человек уходит, либо у него есть вопрос. У него есть вопрос. So we have a question and you need a translator.
Oh. No,
Oh, you don't need a translator.
Hello, John. My name is Alex.
Alex.
Yeah. As an investor, could you say which tools do you and maybe your partners miss, maybe for analyzing the current market or something else?
No.
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 So no problem.
I need a coffee shop or somewhere I can have a beer. So it changes. So for early stage investment is very different from later stage. And when you do later stage investment, you need more data, you need more information, and you need to potentially invest far beyond your immediate network. So that's important. For early stage angel investment, I have a very good friend who's an okay angel investor. And the way he decides which ones he may or may not invest in is how far he can ride on a bicycle. If he needs to get in a car, he won't invest in it. And it's because what he wants to do is he wants to invest in companies which are close to him, and he wants to be able to help. So I think what you have to look at is there's a real difference between what happens at an earlier stage and what happens at a later stage. The biggest problem most investors have is having a CRM system to have a way to continue to maintain and know who's doing what. If there was one thing you could fix, it's like, how do I turn my 13,000 contacts into a big CRM system? It's a challenge for you.
Спасибо за вопрос. Пожалуйста, следующий вопрос.
Здравствуйте, Екатерина, на русском.
Подождите, вы говорите Екатерина, но я не translate.
Джон, скажите, пожалуйста, стартап, в который вы инвестировали, основателем которого была девушка.
I don't want to answer that question. I'm famous for not investing in women. So I've had the good fortune of investing in some phenomenal women, but I haven't invested in enough. When I started doing my angel investing, it was about 2 years ago. And there has definitely been a massive change in the market, particularly in the UK, over the last 2 years. And a lot of it's because there have been women inside startups, which they haven't run, but they've worked for other people. And only over the last 2 or 3 years have a number of them actually moved forward. There's one, and actually she was the very first person to build and exit a company that I had invested in. And it was her and her friend, and she was the lead engineer, which was pretty amazing. And then they had a lead engineer who was a bloke, and he actually ended up having to report to the female CTO. And it's really, really hard to be a female entrepreneur. I think of startups as having 3 parts. There's a startup bit, there's a grow up bit, and there's a finish up bit. And I think that women, and this is probably going to be pretty controversial, I think to start a business takes a lot of raw aggression. You need to do something when everybody tells you you can't. And there's a very masculine trait, kind of very alpha male. But what's really interesting is if a woman can get past that initial starting phase into grow up, I actually think women are much better equipped because of EQ, emotional experience, of actually being able to build and grow big businesses much, much better than men can. And so actually I think there's different character traits, and one of the best things you have to be able to do as an entrepreneur is actually go through that journey and learn the whole way through. But I know and I hope that actually the number.
Спасибо за ваш вопрос. Скажите еще, да, у нас аншлаг. Следующий вопрос.
Джон, вы дали прекрасную квалификацию. Квалификацию, почему стартапы растут и почему они проваливаются. И вы, безусловно, сами следовали своим собственным советам. Вы выбирали умную команду, выживаемую, которая обладает хорошей потенцией, гибкую. И почему же они тогда провалились? Почему эти инвестиции были неудачными?
Because I didn't know that at the beginning. So my success rate, that's fine, it's true, is improved over time. And one of the things I've learned is trying to avoid mistakes. And the whole point, the only thing I would say is if you're trying to invest in ambitious companies, there is natural tendencies, some of them will go bust. And if they're not trying hard enough. I have one company today, and I'll tell you who it is, but they've raised $25 million. And at any point in time, it may turn into a zero, or it might turn into a really big number. Because he's walking such a tight, fine line. And it wouldn't surprise me if he phoned me in the morning and said, it's all over, didn't work. And as an investor, that's really scary, but you want entrepreneurs who are constantly pushing, because if they're not pushing hard enough, you wouldn't invest in them in the first place. So it's a balancing act between being ambitious and then being able to deliver on the back of ambition.
Спасибо за ваш вопрос. Я думаю, Джон ответил на него. Давайте вот как раз еще на тот вопрос у нас есть время.
Hi John, I'm Vadim. I'm interested in your opinion about crypto startup investment and so on, ICO and other stuff. What do you think about it?
What do I think of ICOs? I think that ICOs have a place. I think ICOs can profoundly change the nature of investment. And I think it's much more about user engagement. So imagine this. Imagine that you signed up for Facebook and you were eligible for an ICO. And the more you use Facebook, the more you earned. Yeah? And then one day Facebook sold. So what you do is you're creating a self-perpetuating win, which basically says the more I use this, the more it becomes valuable, the more I can actually make personally. And the other example I give is imagine as an Uber driver that you had an ICO in Uber. And so the better your rating, the more rides you did. You could make money, but imagine you could own a bit of the company. So I think ICOs are not just purely about writing checks and making investments, but it's allowing other people to participate in the overall capital growth of the company.
Another one question. Are you planning to get some projects in your portfolio, crypto project?
Crypto, my last 3 investments were all blockchain. And I thought they were all going to go bust. But they didn't, thank God.
Удачи, Вадим. Спасибо за вопросы. Аплодисменты для вопрос.
It's me again.
Oh, you're back again.
My question is related.
No, go away.
To the Vadim's. How do you decide when and in which cryptocurrency or ICO project to invest?
I haven't. I don't know enough. So I've invested in, this is not an investment advice statement. I've invested in Ethereum, because a lot of the ICOs are built on Ethereum. And so coming to that portfolio picture, it's easier and better to invest in the underlying technology than bet on any single ICO. That's the way I think.
So to the вопрос, and last question,
One.
John. One more.
Oh, that's right.
Джон, такой вопрос. Сейчас лидеры на рынке, Facebook, Google, и все ждут, вот, что видят, что их можно превзойти новыми технологиями, искусственным интеллектом, блокчейном, в первую очередь. И на ваш взгляд, у Гугла и у Фейсбука какие самые у них плохие моменты, минусы этих бизнесов, чего им не хватает, чтобы удерживать лидерство, может быть, с чем, чтобы их можно победить? На ваш взгляд.
I don't think you can. So let me explain. In the 1990s, we had a company, it's called Microsoft. And it was successful, and it made a lot of money. And then one day, a company came along called Google. Microsoft built operating systems. Microsoft built office solutions. How could you replace Microsoft with Google? Google was a search engine. And then guess what? One day, you didn't have Google, you had Facebook, which is a social network. So how does a social network beat a search network, which beats an operating system? And today, there's the question mark around what's the next big thing. There's a lot of people who are arguing that the next big thing is actually Amazon that's been here the whole way through the journey. But how does an e-commerce business beat a social network that beat a search engine, that beat an operating system? And by the way, Microsoft is now coming back with a vengeance. So I actually don't think that actually you should worry about trying to outdo Google or outdo Facebook. I think one has to just have the imagination and the originality to create a big, successful business. It doesn't, none of those companies competed with the one before. I actually argue that actually Uber could have been the thing which actually was better. And it was because actually it's not a taxi company, it's a payment company. The wonderful thing about Uber was actually you got in the car and you got out and it all paid for itself. It was seamless payment systems. You can go to restaurants in New York today and go in, order food and walk out and never have to take your credit card out of your pocket. So I think one has to be much more imaginative, and it's a really good party trick to imagine what's the next thing after the current thing. Good question, really good question. Thank you.
Спасибо за ваш вопрос. Thank you, John. Аплодисменты John Bradford. Время, к сожалению, стремительно подходит к концу. Наш 7-й международный форум предпринимательства. Однако впереди вас ожидает, наверное, одно из самых важных